Hey, welcome to LaborVision. Today's guest is going to be Mr. Charles Daniels from CWA 4123. Hey, Charles, what's happening?
Hey, thank you for having me. I appreciate it. Glad to be a part of the program. Really excited to be here.
Cool. Hey, man, so I heard that you're working on a new project. What's going on with you, man?
I am. I got a couple irons in the fire. The first one that's been out for a little bit, something called the Shame Campaign, and it has to do with federal contracts. As I started to really get more involved with mobilization and what was happening regarding this contract that we've been without now for over a year with AT&T, I found that one of the issues that wasn't getting talked about enough was that federal contracts are offshored to companies that are eliminating U.S. jobs. And I learned that by finding out that AT&T has actually received over $1 billion in federal contracts since 2016. So it does not make sense to me that an American company that's getting American tax dollars to perform work is eliminating American jobs, closing down call centers here, sending them to Mexico, offshoring them, outsourcing that work. It just didn't make any sense. So the Shame Campaign, it is a petition that's asking the president to sign an executive order that bans awarding federal contracts to companies that offshore U.S. jobs.
So let me ask you something before we get too far on. Do you have a website?
I do, yes. It's shamecampaign.org. That's shamecampaign.org.
And that's shame with a M, an N?
That's shame with an S, S-H-A-M-E. And there's a sign up right there, right online. All you got to do is put in your name and email address. It automatically adds you to the petition right there. And then we're going to take that petition and send it along. It goes to multiple people, the Department of Labor, the president, the vice president.
Wow.
Just the idea being that we need these people to actually start being American workers first, because a lot of people talk about supporting American workers and the American middle class. But when you're giving those federal contracts to companies that are sending jobs overseas and eliminating American jobs, you're not walking how you're talking. And it's not just AT&T. General Motors, the same thing. They've received over $600 million since 2016. They're closing down factories. They're closing down plants here, 14,000 jobs lost. Companies like Boeing, they're offshoring work to China, where when you're built over there, there's a technology share. To build stuff in China, you have to tell them how you're building it. So these are literally Boeing products that are being paid for by federal tax dollars, where we're explaining to them how our technology works. That doesn't make any sense. Those jobs should be in the United States. We've got skilled professionals here that can do them. It's just an instance that the offshore rate is so much lower and they're able to create such additional profits by offshoring that work that they choose to do so. But those things need to end, because that money, it comes from us. It should be going to American workers. It's just common sense. Everyone should be behind that.
So let me ask you this. So we got the government is supporting sending jobs overseas, outsourcing. And keep in mind, I want to ask you this, because I want to be really clear about this. Is this a Democratic issue, a Republican issue, an independent issue, a Green Party issue? Because a lot of times people like to box these issues in. Whose issue is this? Which one of the, where we, if I'm a Republican, where am I at on this issue? Should I be like, hey, he's right? Or am I a Democrat? Should I say, hey, he's right? Where am I at on this?
This is an American issue. This has nothing to do with Democrats, Republicans. This is an American issue. And I have found the best way to avoid cleaning up a mess is arguing about who made the mess. I don't care who made the mess. I don't care who signed the bills. I don't care where the legislation came from. There's a problem. We need to address the problem. So the big problem with this is the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act of 2017, which lowered the corporate tax rates from 35% to 21% with the idea that it was going to spur these businesses to create jobs. Okay, if you believe in trickle-down economics, if you believe in supply-side economics, all right, but the rub on that, the ugly hidden thing that isn't talked about, is that the offshore rate is half of that. So as opposed to 21%, it's 10.5% for offshore profits. Now these corporations, they take that 10.5% and they run it through a country like Ireland or the Netherlands or Jamaica, where it's even a lower rate than that, so they can get down to the single digits. So they're not paying their fair share in taxes. So the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act of 2017 actually incentivize American companies to move jobs offshore. That doesn't make any sense. That doesn't help American workers. And anyone who wants to argue with me about that, then there's someone putting $1 in your pocket to make that argument. There's just nothing about it that helps your constituents.
Wow. So this hurts everybody. Is what you're saying. This hurts everybody. And no matter how I feel about abortion or guns, because keep in mind, those issues, God, abortion, guns, always seem to pop up when stuff like this hit the table. You know, one of the things when we met with a Republican legislator back in the day, he told us that it's all about competition. And that's the reason why he wouldn't sign the call center bill. He was like, hey, you know, we have to have good competition and yada, yada, yada. But he failed to recognize that our credit scores and our credit ratings and our credit history and our addresses and people can open accounts. All our information that goes overseas, they've been selling that stuff on the black market. So that's the other piece of this. At least when we keep the jobs here in the United States, American workers reap the benefits. When American workers reap the benefits, we get to buy the products that the American small business is selling, right? Because I got a lawn service. Charles, hey man, I'm working. Come cut my grass. Are you going to pay me the money to cut your grass? So I'm reaping that. Then I go out and I buy that General Motors car or that Ford car or that Chrysler car that my other neighbor over here works and builds, right? So it's all to build on. Whereas when we outsource those jobs, we're outsourcing the money as well. Would you agree?
Absolutely. And you're right. The oversight that you have in those foreign countries, it's not as strict as it is here. You don't have the same worker to manager ratio. You don't have the same kind of security in place. They're not watching them in the same way. It's because they're not paying them in the same way. They don't have the kind of labor laws that we have here. And in regards to competition, that's fine. I'm all for competition, but it's not fair when the system is rigged against American workers.
Right.
If it's literally half the rates for taxes offshore than it is here in the United States, how can we possibly compete with that? And then you couple that with the fact that in some of these countries, people are getting paid $2 to $3 an hour. How can an American worker compete with that? And if you want to say that, hey, I'm fine with sweatshops and I'm fine with 4-year-old kids over there, you know, cleaning out the janitorial stuff. I believe in human rights, and just because you're exploiting someone that you don't see, that doesn't make it okay. So businesses here learned a long time ago that we're not going to put up with this. It's no longer possible. We organize, we unionize, we got safety, we got security, we got benefits. So they changed the game. They recognized that they could no longer exploit American workers, but I can exploit those workers in the Philippines, and I can exploit those workers in India, so I'm going to offshore that work. Well, wait a minute. It costs me extra money to do that because now I got to set up these facilities. I got to deal with all these overhead, other things like that. How do I solve that problem? I know I'm going to buy legislation that makes it cheaper for me to do that work offshore. I'm going to have tax loopholes where I can hide that money in the Cayman Islands and other places like that. Jimmy, like you and I, we don't have a Cayman Islands account. We can't do that.
No.
We file our taxes, and if we mess up our taxes, the IRS comes looking for us.
Yeah.
These guys have set up a system where they're able to legally exploit a system that was bought and paid for by politicians that haven't been putting American workers and by doing that, American people first. It's just wrong, and it needs to be corrected.
Yeah, and you know, I'm sitting here thinking about our contract at AT&T. We're well over a year without a contract. And it seems like other unions I've talked to, their contracts are coming up and they are not renewing them as quick. GM right now, from what I was told, they're preparing for a strike because they think they're going to be out for a while. I know I have a sister that works for GM, and, you know, people have been telling her, hey, you better save your money. That bonus they just got, you better save it because you're probably going to be out. What's the advantage to the companies for not selling these contracts? It seemed like it would be an advantage for them because, number one, I know when I'm getting ready to pay my employees. I know what my cost is because when I sign that contract, I know exactly where my bottom line is going to be because those employees cannot come back to me and say, hey, we want $1 raise. Hey, we want, no, you got a contract for 3 years. You're going to be getting X amount of dollars, and that's it. So they already know their bottom line. That's the greatest thing about a contract. Two, the discrimination stuff that comes up against men and women not having the same pay rate. The contract definitely takes care of that. So I guess what is the advantage of a corporation not signing a contract?
For the corporation, in my opinion, the advantage is none. For the people running the corporation, the advantage is money. These CEOs and executives, the very highest of the high, they're exploiting the system. We've got we got a fundamental problem in this country where over the past 40 years, workers' buying power really hasn't increased at all. While in the last 10 years, CEOs' rates have gone up 1,000%. 1,000%. And that money has to come from somewhere. Now, they're not cutting their own salaries. So instead,
Obviously,
they're going to cut worker salaries. So how do we get more money? And even that 1,000%, that's still not enough. They need more than that still. So yeah, they want a disposable workforce. They want us all to be working for Fiverr, where we're getting gigs, where they don't have to pay for health care, where they don't have to pay for benefits. They want to contract out that work. The disadvantage to that is you get inferior service. I mean, no one likes calling and getting someone who doesn't understand you, where you get transferred a dozen times before you finally get back to an American worker who's actually able to address your problem. It doesn't help out with that. No one likes the fact that they're not investing in infrastructure, that they're not prioritizing customer service, because that costs money. To think about it in a very simple term, when these companies are thinking short term, and that's what CEOs do, because essentially they usually work for like 4 to 5 years. They're not in it for a 30-year like an employee is. They're looking for, how can I get my stock price up, and how can I keep my stock price up? So how do I do that? I eat the feed corn. Instead of having that corn sitting around that I can plant and think about the fact that I need this corporation to be viable in 30 years, right. I need to keep my stock price up right now. So I'm buying back my own stock, because how do I get paid mostly? In stock options. Now, those are vested stock options, so they don't just get them and automatically sell them, but they're probably going to age and mature in like a 4-year span, where the first year they'll get 25%, the next year 50, 75, so they can sell them. Now, they're not hanging on to that as a 401k so that they can retire with it. They're going to take that so they can get it to the highest point that they think they can, and then they're going to sell them for the highest price that they can, and they're going to be out.
Right.
Now, they know when that price is at its highest, because they are inside things. Until 1982, it was illegal for companies to buy back their own stock, specifically because it's insider trading, just straight up. And that's why so many corporations now are buying back their own stock. And how do you make your stock price go up? You make money in the stock market by buying low and selling high.
Right.
If you're a CEO, you make money in the stocks by buying high, because that pushes it even higher. It incentivizes you to think about now as opposed to thinking about the future. And what made America great is we were the leader in innovation. We were the leader in ideas and coming up with new strategies to make money. And we're falling behind now because we no longer prioritize those things, because research and development, employee investment, innovation, all of those things cost money now and lead to more money later, but they don't care about later. They're eating the feed corn.
So let me ask you this. Do you think that the tax cut that they just received, they're using that money to buy back their own stock?
I mean, it's just public knowledge that, yes, absolutely. Last year, they bought back $1 trillion worth of stock. All these corporations did. They took that money, which was the promise being that this is going to create jobs. This is going to create security. This is going to raise wages. And that didn't happen. Instead, they used that money for the rich. And we're not talking about just the rich. We're talking about the mega rich, the ultra wealthy, to get even richer. And they do that by buying back their own stock, because that's how you make money in the CEO game. You have stock options where, hey, I got the option to buy 100,000 shares at $25, and I've got that for my 4-year contract. Now it's 3 years into it. I pushed that price up to $35. Now I can buy 100,000 shares at $25, and then I can sell them in a year at that inflated rate, and I got even more money on top of that. It's just a pay system that's broken, and all of that money that those CEOs are soaking up, instead of going to research and development, instead of going to infrastructure, instead of going to providing a better service, it's all simply about padding the pockets of the people that already have the most. And when you look at the income inequality levels today, the only time they've ever been higher is in the 1920s, right before the Great Depression. And if that doesn't alarm you, then I don't know what to say to you.
Okay, so from the common man point of view, okay, and this isn't a downplay for you, my brother. I'm saying from you and I, let me just say it like that. The common man point of view, what should we be doing? What should the common man do? The common man is listening to this podcast. What should he be doing? Should he be like, yeah, I think the CEOs is doing the right thing? And What should what stance should we, the common man, take? Because a lot of people vote against their own interests. And that's what this show is about. It's about just, let's get the truth out there. Let's get people to vote in their own interest. So what should we be doing?
We need to agree to disagree on certain social issues. If you have certain thoughts about security, immigration, abortion, religion, any of those things, that's fine. Iron sharpens iron. One man sharpens another. Ideas sharpen ideas. It's good to have disagreements. But the things that we all need to agree on is that making things American businesses first only helps the people at the very top. And while water flows down, money trickles up. So trickle down economics, Reaganomics, supply side economics, whatever you want to call it, it doesn't work. That money's not getting to us. So that's why I would say you need to start looking at politicians and your elected officials that are actually voting in ways that help workers. If you look at something like right to work, the proof of the pudding is in the eating. You can look at these states and you can see that the wages there have not increased. You can see that the safety there has not increased. You're 50% more likely to be injured on the job in a right to work state. As a worker, I take that very serious. Oh, yeah. So right to work, it's candy-coated cyanide for American workers. They gave it a nice name, but it's killing the middle class. You look at something like national call center legislation. No one likes calling in and being sent offshore. So if no one likes it, why don't we have national call center legislation that incentivizes good corporate behavior to keep those jobs in the United States? Because a lot of these communities, they survive from those plants, from those call centers. That's hundreds of jobs.
Well, hold on, Charles. I want you to put some facts with that. How many call centers have closed in the last year in the state of Michigan that you know of or you were directly affected with?
This year, we had our call center in Kalamazoo that was closed. I know that in our district, we had three, one in Indianapolis, Indiana, one in Appleton, Wisconsin, and then the Kalamazoo call center, which is in Michigan. And then also I'm aware of a call center that was closed in Syracuse, New York, and Meriden, Connecticut.
Okay, so all that was done within the last year, maybe?
1 year.
Okay, let's just say 12 months. They got the tax cut prior to, right?
That is correct. December 2017 is when the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act of 2017 was enacted.
Okay, so that proved the tax cut said we were going to create jobs.
Correct.
Okay. You just got through telling me a whole list of call centers where those people, and I mean, those call centers didn't have 2 people. They had probably minimum 60 people, I'm guessing 40. Let's just say 40 minimum, right?
Yes, which is a downsize of what they had previously, just based on the offshoring that's been done over the past decade. Really, like the 1990s is when that started to happen, and it's been a slow trickle. It's a death by 1,000 pinpricks. So when these call centers get closed down that used to have 400, 600, 900 people working it there, now they got 40, 60, 90 people working there. So they're not dying with a last shriek. It's just a slow gasp as they exhaust, and no one pays attention because it's not a big number.
Well, hold on, but we have to look at it like this, my brother. You just named call centers not just in Detroit, not just in Michigan. You named call centers in other places, and I'm going to add the Bethune building, and we had a whole local that went away because of outsourcing.
Yes, and that was in 2017 in December 15th, 2017. That's when they announced that they were closing that center, which is literally right before these tax cuts were enacted. So, yes, they're eliminating U.S. jobs. The call centers in Guadalajara and Mexico City, they're increasing their presence there. So, talking about immigration, worrying about someone coming here and taking your job is pointless when we're giving the jobs away.
There you go.
We need to create a legislative wall
Yep.
between corporations eliminating our jobs. We should not make it easy. We should make it difficult. And we should incentivize corporations for keeping American jobs. And there should be punishments in some ways for them eliminating them. And for any elected official to talk about being America first and American workers and being pro-worker and bringing back jobs, to not call out corporations and to not talk about flaws in the tax code that helps those corporations destroy American jobs, it's wrong.
This directly hits us, the common people. Because you keep in mind, the rich is what? Less than 10% of the population?
I mean, you're really talking about like the 1%, and then of that 1%, you're talking about the 0.1% that are really truly the ultra wealthy, and they contribute a tremendous amount of money. It's more of like a plutocracy as opposed to a democracy, which is a ruling by the wealthy. And if you look at something like Citizens United, which was a Supreme Court ruling that essentially said corporations are people and money is speech, that's where dark money in politics is.
Right.
So I can have a candidate that's pro-labor, pro-worker, every day goes out there and tries to help people, and he might be able to raise $100,000 from those people, but I can have a politician that gets millions and millions of dollars from these corporations that don't have to report it in any way because it's speech. I'm making air quotes right now. Now, how does that person who's doing it the right way compete with that other person? They can't buy the kind of radio ads. They can't buy the TV ads. They can't have the exposure. They can't have the team out there that's making phone calls, sending text messages, knocking doors. It's a perversion of democracy. It's voter suppression. It's all that's wrong with our system right now. And I think it would make our forefathers sick to know that those kind of rulings are now law in the United States that they created with the idea of by the people, for the people, of the people, by the people, for the people, not the companies.
So what I'm gathering here is the fact that I can love my guns, I can love God, I can hate abortion, and everything you told me, I could walk into the call center I work at, and these people that I'm voting for, that's supporting my guns, that's supporting God, that's supporting abortion, right? They supporting all the stuff that all my big hitters, right? You know, I feel welfare is horrible and you should pull yourself up by your bootstraps. You're saying that they're literally cutting the bootstraps that I'm using to pull myself up by outsourcing, well, excuse me, not them outsourcing, let me be truthful, but supporting the corporations that's outsourcing our jobs.
Yes, and all of those things are important issues, and I agree. We need to have discussions on them.
Right. Yeah, I agree. But we're getting hammered here. I mean, I'm voting for you to get all the big stuff done, so to speak, to a point. Let's just say to a point, because nobody's really came in and said we need to take everybody's guns and you can't believe in God and everybody should have abortion. No one came in and said that. But the big ticket issue is we don't have jobs. Our jobs is going overseas, and it's not going overseas because it doesn't exist. They're going overseas so someone else can get rich.
Yes, and it's not even necessarily overseas. I mean, outsourcing is an epidemic as well, because you have these workers that have been loyal to a company for years, decades, lifetimes, and they're now being treated as a disposable workforce and bringing in contractors because it's much more difficult to organize than it was previously, because legislation has been enacted that hurts unions, that harms unions. And that's all about just worker rights and trying to put American workers first. So if you make it harder to organize, then you make it easier to outsource. And that makes it easier for companies to exploit workers. And that's where right to work and other collective bargaining rulings, Janus, all of those things, that's where that plays a role. And like, I get that immigration and the military, terrorism, all those things are important.
Right.
But having a job is by far the most important issue that I face, because if I don't have a job, I'm not going to have access to health care. I'm not going to be able to pay for my house to protect my family.
Right.
I'm not going to have to worry about someone coming and taking my job because I've already lost my job. So when they talk about the economy, because they'll call you, we're coming up on big elections, and they're going to call you and they're going to ask you what's important to you. And I'd bet that they won't even have jobs as something listed. They'll have the economy. So they say, what's important? You'll say jobs. And they'll say, so the economy. And it's important that people say, no, not the economy, jobs. The stock market going up, that's great. My 401k looks fantastic.
Yeah.
But if I no longer have a job, I can't contribute to that 401k, and I'm going to have to take money out. It doesn't help me. It's also something there's variance there. It's going to go up and down. It's a long-term investment for me. My job is how I pay my day-to-day bills. So it's important to put those jobs first and to let people know that this is what we're really focused on, that the ability to work and provide for your family all comes back to your job. And if we're having all these issues with offshoring and outsourcing and legislation being bought and paid for by millionaires and billionaires and ultra wealthy people who do not have altruistic intentions, then there's a flaw in the system. And it has to be addressed before it's too late, before it turns into a Great Depression.
Right. So, final thought. Charles, I would like to ask you, what are the issues on the table for AT&T, for the reason why AT&T doesn't have a contract with CWA? What is the issues on the table? As president of a local, what did you hear through your grapevine? What's the sticking points?
I'd say the biggest things would be job security. We're looking for some kind of assurance that we want to be part of your future. There was kind of an understanding back in the day that as long as the company was doing well, you could do well with the company.
Right.
When the company was down, you were down with them and you worked, and then they were up and you were up with them. Where now it's gotten to the point that even though corporations are profitable, even though they're making money, they're still downsizing and eliminating jobs. So having some kind of contractual language that says there's some securities, there's some assurance that the work, if there's work to be done, you need to be giving it to your loyal employees. You shouldn't be outsourcing it to contractors. You shouldn't be closing down their call centers and sending them overseas. So job security, I think, is number one. And then number two would probably be healthcare, because even though these companies are making just billions of dollars in profits, even though they've received billions of dollars from the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act of 2017, they're still crying poor.
Right.
And they still want you to pay more for your healthcare. And those healthcare costs are skyrocketing. It's just astronomical. And it's because these big pharmaceutical companies, they lobby like hell in order to have legislation in place that limits competition. There's a reason why that guy could buy the medicine for AIDS and HIV and increase the price the next day by 1,000%. It's completely legal.
Right.
And it shouldn't be, because healthcare is a human right. One of the things that's guaranteed is life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. I don't know what's more germane to life than access to healthcare, affordable healthcare. So I don't think you should be able to gouge there. I don't think you should be able to exploit. If a corporation wants to raise their prices on pens, I can go somewhere else and decide to get different pens. I can decide not to have a pen at all, but there's no price that I'm going to put on my life or the life of the people that I love. So I have to have that. I have to pay whatever they're asking for. And when insulin prices spiking and all this medication becoming so expensive, even though you can just drive to Canada and pay a tenth of the price for the exact same medication, there's a problem here. And the problem is that profits are being put over people, corporations are being treated like individuals, and the people are suffering. And until we address that, until we call a spade and say the problem here is income inequality and how these corporations are being pandered to, we're not going to solve the problem.
Charles, I would like to say thank you. I really appreciate what you have done. Great podcast. I've learned a lot today.
Always a pleasure. Thank you for having me anytime.
And everyone, Union Members Radio will return on June 16th, and Charles Daniels, president of 4123, will be our special guest. So please join us then, and stay tuned and subscribe to LaborVision podcast. Until next time, take care. Peace.